Welcome to the Crazy Might Work podcast, where we celebrate authors, entrepreneurs, innovators, inventors, and scientists who live at the very frontiers of human consciousness and possibility. We discuss their moments of breakthrough and analyze the strategies they use to enhance their own thinking and challenge conventional wisdom. So our guest today was born in Australia, graduating from the University of Queensland with first-class honours, followed by a PhD in psychology. After a year at the Menninger Foundation in Topeka, Kansas, he played a leading role in bringing behavioural therapy to Australia. Within the space of just 3 years, he became the most well-known clinical psychologist in the country and heralded some of the great changes in psychotherapy of the 1970s, being behavioural therapy and sex therapy, which was all new to Australia at the time. And then he experienced a breakdown of his own, and this really sent him on a search for understanding. So looking at the Eastern philosophers and ways of reconciling those with what he already knew from the field of clinical psychology. And in applying those new procedures to support his own and his patients' journeys, he was able to navigate a path to freedom from anger, fear, and depression. These fresh approaches proved so popular that they really outpaced his personal capacity to meet with patients. And so what this person has done is really develop free self-help therapies for the broader population and made those accessible and available to a much wider audience. So we're here today to explore the human mind's inner workings and this deep combination of lived and clinical experience, which our guest has. So please join me in welcoming our guest today, Dr. Ron Farmer. Hi, Ron. Welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to spend this time with us and share some of your wisdom with us. Could you tell us just a little bit from your perspective about your personal story and sort of how you've got to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, part of what that story is you've already covered up until the breakdown. And what happened before the breakdown is I was running faster and faster and just trying to cram everything into the day and night, not realising that I was setting myself up to a big internal explosion. So I had what's called generally a massive nervous breakdown, which after a while I called a nervous breakthrough, because I decided that there can't be this happening to me that has no point to it. Like everything in nature, there's a purpose behind everything that happens in life. And so what I was left with when I had the breakdown was a constant feeling of terror and apprehension, multiple phobias. I couldn't drive a car, look at a fire, I couldn't go into a closed room. I just had over 50 phobias that had come up within the space of 2 weeks. So in desperation, I went to a psychiatrist and said, "No, give me a pill to help me get out of this." And fortunately, he said, "Look, I can give you some medication, but it'll cover up whatever it is that's causing this." So I only took half a Valium ever and carried them for the rest of the next 10 years in my pocket, just in case. And so I used the fear to guide me. And it was the fear itself, which in a way became my best friend. Terrifying as it was, it told me if I was going in the wrong direction, because the fear would increase. And if I was doing the right thing with my mind, then the fear would gradually go.
And Ron, it must have changed your whole sort of way of practicing and thinking as a psychologist. Because I guess it's one thing to know the theory and quite another to have the lived experience of those conditions.
Yes, well, what was so shocking to me and depressing was that nothing that I knew in psychology and nothing I'd read in psychiatry could help me. Nothing worked. And so I knew then I had to find my own way. Not knowing where to turn, I guess there was just some trust that something would happen. And the first clue came by accident that I was living in Sydney at the time, and I wanted to go up north to around the area around Hippie Land, Byron Bay and Nimbin, and just check it out where a friend of mine was living. And I noticed when I got on the train, the further I got from Sydney, the less the fear. And that really was a revelation to me because nothing had worked before then. So I figured out after a while that fear, one of the purposes of fear is to tell us that we're going the wrong way or we're in the wrong place. The nervous system gives this strong information, and the more important the journey, the stronger the fear. So that was my first clue. I mean, I didn't have a revelation about it, it just gradually seeped into me. And one of the things that happened in the nervous breakdown was that the first thing that happened, apart from the fear, was that I knew that I knew nothing. And that was just so disturbing for me because I'd been thinking I knew everything. In fact, I'd started to think I was the best psychologist in the world. So I knew that I knew nothing. And with that, I think that was a way of safety for me to always doubt whatever I was thinking.
It's interesting, that it was sort of a physical movement that first sort of triggered that for you, the act of moving away from the city, which was obviously triggering, at least some of that anxiety. I think we tend to have this kind of dualistic view of ourselves as human beings, where it's the brain drives the body around. What's your take on that, Ron? I mean, how much of it is I guess physical, in terms of our interaction with the world?
Yes, well, certainly we get physical information in terms of how the body, the nervous system reacts. So it's the same if we eat something that's not good, well, we get a reaction. Well, if we're thinking the wrong thing or if we're going in the wrong direction with our lives, then our body also gives us information. The next step for me, which helped me get out of fear, was I chanced upon a line in a book that I just picked up by chance by a Sufi saint, Hazrat Inayat Khan, and it said, "Fear is the door to the unknown. Unbolt that door and step through into a new world." Well, this was the first clue I had that fear had a purpose. And although it didn't immediately resolve it, it set me on a course of trusting that this fear had a point to it. And so many things I've learned through that. Fear has led me to understand that, for instance, I'm not my mind. I live in a body that thinks, feels and moves. I can't be my body because if I cut my fingernails, that's not me on the table, I mean, when does it stop being me? I can't be my thoughts because this thought came, this thought went. I didn't come and go. I watched it come and go. And I can't be my feelings because I didn't feel the way I'm feeling now yesterday. So I gradually came to understand, and through reading of Eastern literature, that I'm the eternal witness. I'm the one who's always here. And nothing touches me. I mean, Ron Farmer was freaked out, but who I am was never frightened. Who I am was always just observing.
Yeah. And Ron, how important do you think that is? So if someone was in your shoes, where you were when you had the breakdown, what do you think is the first? What's the starting point for them? What's the most important realization that they can have? Is it what you've just shared with us, or is it something else?
Yes, but that can't be communicated straight away because it's such a mind shock to to recognise that we're not who we think we are. I mean, that could, if it came too soon, that could make it even worse. So, firstly, the therapist, that's myself, it's my true belief that this person who's frightened or depressed or confused, who they truly are is none of that. Who they truly are is the one who's rock steady in the middle of it all and has a state of peace which they've yet to tap into. And so my presence helps them move towards that, and then they're ready for them to have this reminder of who they are.
I guess it's there's no substitute for being able to model that, and having had that that lived experience. I'm sure that those that you interact with must extract that as a sort of a calming effect.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Ron, tell us a bit more about. So you were instrumental in promoting and introducing both cognitive behavioural therapy and sex therapy in Australia. What did psychologists do before that? So what was what was in textbooks before you started to talk about those two topics?
Well, there's two things. Firstly, psychologists do therapy. When I was a student at university, we were told we were not to do therapy. Our role was to do psychological tests and give that to the psychiatrist who did therapy. And that never sat right with me. I just felt my calling was to learn how to be a therapist. But at the time, the dominating approach was what's called psychodynamic therapy, which came out of mostly Sigmund Freud. And this didn't make sense to me, and it didn't seem to be very effective. I read about in an Irish journal of psychiatry of a psychiatrist has been seeing a man with sexual impotence for 9 years, 3 times a week, and nothing had changed. And I thought, well, what's the point of that? And then I read Sigmund Freud all his life was too frightened to go into a cemetery. And he couldn't even understand what fear was. So I thought, well, perhaps they don't have much to offer. And then, I can't take any credit for it, behaviour therapy came on the scene through a journal from South Africa, a book from South Africa. And then something happened in America and it just resonated with me, and I thought, this is the way to go. If you learn something, you can unlearn it. That was the whole point behind it.
Yeah. Tell us just a little bit more about it, Ron, just for the sort of, the layperson. And how would you describe cognitive behavioral therapy? What are the sort of key premises? And is that still your go-to frame of reference? Is that typically, at the heart of the kinds of interventions that you would suggest or recommend to someone?
Yes, it's always there, but it's not the main part now. But what it is I guess the main approach is called systematic desensitization. And I'll give a simple example. If somebody's got a phobia of spiders, so they jump on a chair whenever there's a spider, or they run screaming out of the room. Systematic desensitization means, first of all, you learn how to calm the nervous system. So you learn how to deeply relax the body. And that's pretty straightforward. Then the next thing is to create a fear hierarchy. And so you might start off just looking at a photo of a daddy long-legged spider, a harmless one, until gradually you look at more severe ones. Then you have a spider in a bottle 20 feet away, then you bring it closer and closer until eventually you can have a tarantula sitting on your hand and you don't bother at all. That's because you're giving the chance of the nervous system to learn there's nothing to be frightened of. So that's always there in the back of my mind in my approach. The other main approach was what's called assertive training or role-playing, where people role-play what they're frightened of doing in real life. And so, in fact, the very first person I ever treated was a boy of 9 years of age who he hadn't eaten anything in 4 years. He fed through a tube in the stomach and looked like he'd just come out of Belsen. And I tried all sorts of things with him and nothing worked until eventually I reread the early notes on him and said he'd been a plump little boy when he first went to school, and some bullies said, "Oh, we're going to roll you down the hill." And they did, and he was terrified. Then he vomited his breakfast and his dinner and so on. So I figured, well, this guy doesn't know how to deal with bullies. So I role-played with him. I gave him a number of responses written on cards like, "Oh, go home to your mother," or "grow up," or, "you're an idiot." And he would have these pack of cards, and then I would go through a hierarchy with him. I started off, he was living in hospital, I started off saying, "Oh, you're a new kid here. How long have you been here?" And then your hair's a bit different to mine. And then gradually move up to, "Oh, my God, you're fat." And so he had to just learn how to deal with that. And within a space of about 3 months, he was eating. And then about a year later, he sent me a photo. He was in his local footy team and riding his bike. And so I knew from my very first patient that this stuff worked,
Yeah.
I mean, before that, they'd taken out half his pancreas and they wanted to take out the rest, just naturally looking for, what was causing it.
Ron, I know that you're involved in values-led education, and just listening to that story and thinking about what it is that we actually learn at school-going age. How valuable do you think it would be for some of these things to be part of the curriculum? That idea of understanding how to regulate your own behaviour or challenge some of your limiting assumptions.
I think it's essential because we look at the world today and it's heading towards a cliff in so many ways, and nobody seems to know what to do about it. Adults find it almost impossible to change. Children are able to change. So if we give children the ability to engage in self-transformation, then that means that there'll be adults who will be able to change themselves so the world can change. So I think these simple principles are very important. And like in the school that I was part of establishing called Tugulua School, it's based on human values education. And one of the first things we learn, and what they learn, in fact, just this morning, I was sitting there with about 90 boys who not welcome in other schools, and they were focusing on the breath. Eyes closed, bring the attention to the breathing. As thoughts come, let thoughts go, bring the attention back to the breath. Simply that, gradually moving towards becoming master of the mind instead of the slave of the mind. Most people believe everything they think. Whatever thought comes out of the mind, that tends to direct their behaviour. Whereas when we learn to take a simple thing like breath focus, what happens is that automatically we learn that thoughts come and go.
Some of our discussion has been around sort of individual thought patterns and ways of being. But what you've just described there is I guess a communal or community setting, in which these things are being practiced collectively. And I just wonder, your thoughts on that. So if you were looking at an organization, for example, a business, what do you think is the scope for some kind of collective practice along these lines?
Oh, enormous. I mean, I would think that in the best organisations, the team would get together and they would have a short 10-minute focus on becoming connected with their inner stillness. Because we can't really access our wisdom unless the mind is able to be at least put at rest to some degree. I mean, you can't hear the birds sing in the forest if you've got your radio going. So you've got to be able to turn that off so you can listen to the song that's coming from within.
And it sounds like mindfulness is a big part of of this practice as well?
Yes, yeah. Mindfulness is essential, I think. Being aware of what the senses are engaged in. And my understanding is that what's happening is that we're sitting in the position of being the witness, and that leads us to identify more with who we truly are. In other words, most of the world thinks we are this body. We behave as if we are this body, and we think we are what we think and what we feel. I mean, so often you hear people say, "Well, that's me. That's who I feel. That's what I feel." You know, it's not who they are.
Yeah. So, we're particularly interested in the concept of, creative problem solving or insight. How do you see these things as being related, Ron? I mean, is there a different level of, thinking or inspiration that comes about when someone is mindful?
Yes, yeah, particularly if they're able to tap into these human values that are lying within themselves. First of all, to believe that our true nature is a peace beyond understanding. Our true nature is to have pure love for everybody. We're born like that. That's why people are attracted to look into a baby's eyes, oh my God, it's another universe. Well, that's how we were. And then gradually we covered the diamond up with mud, and then we started to believe we are the mud. We've forgotten we are the diamond. And so, first of all, gradually developing that conviction that who we are is extraordinary. It's exquisite. It's amazing. That's a different sort of self-confidence. It's not an ego confidence. It's a confidence in knowing that we are beyond this body. We come into a body, we leave a body. We're not born, we don't die. That sort of confidence. It changes the way we think. And then to access this inner wisdom, this intuition, we have to be able to calm the mind. And we have to be connected with these values. I mean, you can't really have an intuitive thought that's of any value if you're feeling distressed and disturbed. I mean, Isaac Newton was sitting calmly under a tree when the apple fell on his head. But he had the intuitive thing about gravity. And all great intuitive thoughts come when we're at rest inwardly.
Mm. So, in that vein, if you wanted to change a way of thinking in yourself, Ron, or if you're advising a patient, what would you suggest to them as the kind of first step in interrupting a pattern of thoughts that are not serving them?
Mm. Well, first thing, as I said before, to develop the habit of turning again and again to watching the breath. But secondly, what also helps is to have a little mantra or a prayer. You see, the nature of the mind, it must hold on to something. So if you don't want it to run hither and thither or hold on to a disturbing thought, we must give it something safe and that has purpose. For instance, I saw a lady, a young businesswoman the other day who is very, very powerful in what she's doing. But she was finding it difficult to sleep. She was getting more and more stressed. And so with her, I said to her, what feeling would you like to have all the time without any exception? Straight away she said love. I said, what fear would you like to banish from your life so you never had it again? She said, anger. I said, this is then your mantra. This has come from the wise woman in you. So as you breathe in, say silently, I breathe in love. As you breathe out, I let go anger. I breathe in love, I let go anger. This gives the mind something to hold on to and also allows it to travel inward, to discover this diamond, to go beyond the mud.
Some very, very wise words, Ron. I'd like to just turn attention just for a moment to leadership in organizations. You've spoken about this executive who was struggling to sleep, and the advice that you gave her. What about other leaders? So those in that leadership or that executive suite, if they wanted to improve the organizational environment or the culture, how would you suggest that they go about that? What is the best way to address those things?
Yeah, well, what they'd like is a good team. Now, the word team can be an acronym, TEAM. So T stands for transformation, not information. So not just information. So the leader needs to be able to know how to change themselves. They learn how to listen, learn how to not be angry, learn how to care about people. They need to be on this ongoing journey and need to radiate that. The people who work for them see, this guy, this lady wants to change, They want to be a better person. That really affects people who work with them. Then you've got E. They need to become an exemplar. So if they want everybody to work hard, they have to work hard. If they want people to be on time, they have to be on time. If they want people to get on with each other, they have to get on with everybody. And then you've got A. A is awareness of oneness. They need to recognise that everybody's a diamond. Everybody. And not just have people well, I'm going to open my heart to this person, I'm going to keep it shut to that one, but rather to seek to love everybody the same, to see everybody is special, everybody's extraordinary, amazing. They just don't know it. And then M is mastery, master of, listen to the master. There is an inner guidance system. It's like when we're going somewhere and we turn on Siri in the car, and Siri says, go here, go there. Well, we've got the same thing inside here. Everybody has. The tree's got it, the dog's got it, the moon's got it. Every human being's got this inner guidance system, which sometimes we call the inner voice. So we've got to learn to, first of all, be able to hear it, and then we have to learn to obey it, be true to that. So TEAM.
Thanks, Ron. That's easy to remember. Probably harder to practice, though.
Yeah, I'm way down here.
I'm curious to know a bit more about the values-led education. What does that denote?
Well, first of all, with the boys that we have, these are boys in our school between the ages of 9 and 15, and they just can't fit in with other schools. They're either too angry or too sad or too freaked out. And the big school with 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 students just can't handle them. So we've got 120 students. And our teachers, they have the, I guess, the privilege of knowing that in order to help these boys, they have to change themselves. As Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. So these teachers know they have to be the exemplar of loving for these boys to be able to open their hearts. They have to be the exemplar of being able to transmute anger into understanding and acceptance, so the boys can learn it. So that's the first step. And then the second thing is to bring these values into every aspect of the curriculum. So when they're learning about how the nature works, how water comes from vapours from the ocean and so forth, and the rain and the rivers, they need to have a value system in there. That for instance, when the rivers are flowing, the river is just giving. It's giving all the time. But a river also has banks. Right? These banks are there. And that's to do with self-discipline. We need to have these banks of self-discipline. Otherwise, that river would be all over the place. So if we can bring values into everything that we're teaching children, so that as they grow, they learn these universal principles. So when they graduate, they're an asset to society instead of a nuisance.
And Ron, how effective has this been in sort of changing the pathway or the destiny of these youth?
Oh, incredible. Just incredible. And it's not just our school, Combobulator School. I mean, in the early 2000s, there are these group of visionary educationists who carried out this massive study in Australia over 6 years, over 300 schools, something like 6,000 students, and the research is the best ever that's been done in the world. And what it says clearly is that when you bring values into an education system, everything goes up. You know, kids want to come to school more, they want to pay attention more, teachers don't get burnt out, they love their work, everything just improves. So the idea is that these values lead to an environment where kids want to learn, where they feel happy, where teachers are free to teach, to be their best at what they do. So there's no doubt in my mind that the research is there. It's just not being looked at by those in charge. You know?
I think it would be a marvelous addition to the curriculum. You know, if those kinds of life skills could be more widely available. And earlier, Ron, we referenced the fact that you've created these self-help, self-therapy resources. What are those, and how do people access those?
Yes, well, first of all, the website is www. and then self-help therapy, that's all one word, .com.au, www.selfhelptherapy.com.au. And then once you're on there, it'll take you to, I think, 4 little videos, and I think about, there's 16 audio recordings on different subjects. One's called Transmuting Anger, for instance. It's all about how to deal with this giant which comes into our system and rages around, you know, how to make it into a powerful force for good, so it doesn't hurt anybody but creates good. We've got muscle relaxation, insomnia, healing through grief, loss and death, overcoming depression, all covers the sort of spectrum of human behaviour, and it's free, and so you can play it again and again, and on your phone or wherever.
Fantastic! What a great resource. Would you suggest that as a first port of call for someone to try that, or would you suggest that it's always better to engage with a therapist or both? What is your take on that?
No, I think go for this because these are universal teachings. They're not something we've made up. They've been around for thousands of years. The principles involved in these recordings, and I think also self-reliance is a great skill to develop. People like to know they can do something for themselves. Certainly, it's sometimes it's of great value to see a therapist, but to be able to know where you can get access to the universal wisdom, I think is very good for a society. Because we've lost our general points of reference. Hardly anybody goes to church. Parents have, many of them have lost the plot. They're too caught up in being guided by what's ever on TV or something. We don't have the same societal wisdom that we used to have, and so that needs to be made available to people.
Fantastic, Ron. We'll certainly make a note of that. In our subtitles, make sure that the people know where to go for that.
Oh, you made my day. Thank you.
And I must ask you, who's your sort of frame of reference? When you think about great people or leaders in the world, this or previous generations, who sort of stand out for you as a role model in the kinds of things that you've been suggesting to us? Oh
wow, there's just so many. This Mahatma Gandhi stands out. A Sufi saint called Hazrat Inayat Khan. There's a Hindu saint called Aurobindo, who he's the one who helped me. I can hardly read him. He's so intelligent. And I'm not very, but one line stood out for me. It said, when your mind thinks something is true, explore the opposite of that belief till you see that could equally be true. Then your mind is in balance. You know nothing, and you're free. So that's been a godsend to me, I can tell you.
Yeah.
So, and also Satya Sai Baba, his teachings, Ramana Maharshi, who gave to the world the approach to simply ask, who am I? Who am I? You know, I'm not this body, mind, thoughts. I'm not any. Who am I? And stay with that, and it takes you deeper and deeper into this wonderful place.
Thanks, Ron. I think that's a beautiful note to finish on. I really thank you, for your time this afternoon, and some absolute gems there, which I'm going to take away and mull over. But I'm sure our listeners will too. So thank you again for your generous time and for sharing that wisdom with us.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ron.